IVM.
There has been a lot of noise about the Internet of Things, or IoT, and its impact on our lives. There are now billions of physical devices around the world that are now connected to the Internet. From something as small as an AirPod to something as big as a plane, all are collecting and sharing data. However, more devices and more data means more complexity. Intel helps you counter this complexity by letting you do more with less. IoT solutions from Intel fuse the power of edge and cloud computing with advanced orchestration to speed insights that help maximize revenue and reduce costs while revealing new ways to compete, win, and build your business of tomorrow. To learn more about how you can connect the unconnected in an end-to-end IoT solution built using the secure, scalable, and manageable Intel IoT platform, visit intel.in. Shunya One is brought to you by Intel. Performance made flexible. That's how wonderful gets done.
Hey everyone, welcome to Shunya One, episode 161. Amit, how's it going? How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. 161, one more than 160, 11 more than 150.
I know, and the year is almost out. It's like the end of 2021. Can you believe it? And we're still here talking to each other on Zoom, on screen.
Yeah, you know what? Let's make it so that the 2022 recordings are all in studio, right? I mean, it's not that far from you anyway. We should do that. We should make sure.
We should do that. We should do that very, very soon. But, I really love that we were able to sort of end the year with some very interesting conversations. Yeah. And this one especially, I think, is one which very, very, one of the hottest startups around, if I may say so myself. I think everyone's heard about Meesho.
More information about them than I think that people otherwise would have gotten, right? Because I think that we have Sanjeev as a guest on the show right now, and he got into it, right? I mean, like, he didn't shy away from questions. He answered all kinds of stuff. I thought it was really insightful.
Exactly. I think, being obviously he's the co-founder and CTO, lucky to have him sort of go deep into the tech pieces of the platform as well, beyond just the business stuff, which you probably have read about. So very, very interesting conversation. I'm really happy in the way it turned out. So I hope you all will like it too. Let's take a break and come back and talk to Sanjeev about the Meesho story. Hey Amit, how's it going? What have you been up to?
I'm doing well, man. Continuing to read up on these Intel case studies that we've been talking about for the last few weeks, right? Really one amazing example after another.
Really? So what's got your attention this week?
So I was looking at some of the full stack solutions that Intel's been deploying, right? What they call edge to the cloud.
Yes, I have heard about that program. They actually did some work with Audi, right?
Yeah, Audi is one of the really, really cool examples. So basically what used to happen is Audi used to pull 1 out of 1,000 cars out to manage QC, right? That's basically one car every day. Now, Audis are expensive cars, right? So they're clearly not happy about destroying a car every day. It's way too costly.
Yeah, and it's also, I imagine not the most effective way of doing things either, right? I mean, it tells you very little about what the other 999 cars that pass through, whether they're okay or not.
So Intel deployed a solution, what they call from the edge to the cloud, right? So the solution basically involved robotic welding systems, which they combined with an algorithmic approach, right? And what this resulted in was like an end result was essentially accurate insights into what was happening on the floor.
Wow.
And this allowed them to be much more effective.
Okay, I got to check this one out too. This is also on intel.in?
Yep, for this one and a whole lot more other really interesting case studies, you can go to intel.in and read up on this stuff and see how businesses are working with Intel today.
Hey Sanjeev, welcome to Shunya One. How are you doing?
All good, Shiladitya. Thank you. Thank you for this. Super excited to share our journey with the audience.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. We've been doing this show for a while, like I was sharing earlier, and we always love to sort of, talk to entrepreneurs who've been building iconic companies. I think, Meesho definitely qualifies for that tag amongst all the various other tags that you have today. But, before we get into what people probably know from, let's say, all the press that you guys have and of course, public info and the brand that you are today, maybe you could give us a little backstory on, how you sort of personally got into this. What was your sort of, origin for getting into Meesho and the original thought, and then take us through the journey.
Yeah. So basically, all of this started with me working in Sony in Japan. Just a background for that. Me and Vidit, we both are batchmates from IIT Delhi, 2012 batch. Same department, same hostel, very good friends, same wing as well. So knew each other quite well. And then I went to Sony after college. I was there in Japan for 3 years.
Wow.
But towards the end
Which
of
part
those
of
3
Japan?
years. Yeah. So I was in Tokyo. It's their headquarters in Shinagawa. It's a place in Tokyo. So I was working as a software developer in camera team there. First few years, first 1.5 years, I was with their camera team. And for the next 1.5 years, I had moved to Sony Mobile, again in Tokyo, looking at their, working for their camera division, which is for the Sony Mobile. So it was a great experience, right? Tokyo is very different from or overall Japan culture is very different from what you'll ever experience anywhere else in the world. So
I think very few people would have that. I mean, at least in people I know and entrepreneurs in India in general would have that exposure. Usually we have ex-Valley folks, right?
Yeah.
Very few we have ex-Rising Sun folks. So interesting.
Of course, the kind of culture that you have, very punctual, very managed, streamlined processes. They have, I think, playbooks for almost each and everything that they do. And of course, that brings in a lot of efficiency, etc. Good people at heart. But yeah, great culture to experience, a lot of learnings. And of course, slightly difficult as well because the language barrier is huge, right? You have to learn Japanese. And it's one of the difficult languages, I would say. But yeah, we managed to do that. So I think towards the end of my tenure in Sony, I was trying to figure out what to do next with life. Like, is this the job that I want to continue with? Do I want to do something else? And I think in parallel, in India, the startup ecosystem was evolving. And maybe evolving is the wrong word. It was exploding, right? And I think I just thought maybe, do I want to get into something, create something of my own? And again, the primary motivation behind that was kind of just creating massive impact, creating something which has long-lasting impact in the world. And of course, India being the primary focus. And what happened was at that point in time, some reason I called with it. I think there's one of these startups who approached me on, do you want to come and join us? And right. I think I was doing NLP as one of the side projects. And so not part of Sony, but just trying out as a side project, right. I would say, with some of the other friends in Sony, trying to build a basic product of sorts. But yeah, so then I called Vidit and he said, okay, why do you want to join a startup? Why not start something ourselves? And I think it was that easy because of the kind of trust that we have from our college days. I think it was very easy. Vidit has even then had a lot of exposure on the business side. I went into tech. So it seemed like a perfect combination to kind of start something. And it was then decided, okay, in just a call, we were, okay, we need to do something. We want to start, we want to create massive impact. All of this is fine, but what do we do? Like, what are the opportunities out there? What are the problems that we're excited about? And there, I think we had not decided the problem, but we had resigned already. So I think that is the kind of leap of faith that we had. So if you want to do something, this is the right time. You just cannot wait for the right problem, right solution to kind of, you just jump into it. And that is what we did. We resigned. I came back to India, came back to Bangalore, and we would just started. We started exploring which is the biggest area which needs disruption, which is still kind of has a lot of juice left in it. There are a lot of inefficiencies. I think one thing which we have identified was this unorganized retail market. That sounded like it's a massive opportunity. People have not been able to crack it. Even then, like the top e-commerce platforms were only maybe targeting top less than 5% of the entire retail market. Even now, the penetration is maybe less than 15%. But seemed like a massive opportunity. Now, and there are multiple ways a business could be built on this, targeting this unorganized retail market. The way we started was something which is very different from what we do currently, which is we thought we created something which was hyper-local fashion discovery platform. At that point in time, it was then called Fashioneer, which stands for Fashion Nearby. So of course, when you start, you create your own icons, you do everything yourself, you build your app, you build your website, you build your backend. And both of us used to go to, so we started from Koramangala and HSR. Basically, we created an app and we mapped some of the multi-brand fashion outlets on that app. And then we wanted to showcase inventory, the products in these multi-brand outlets, right? And of course, there's just two people, right? You don't have any on-ground ops guy doing anything else, right? So we, ourselves, I had bought one of the cameras from Sony, the camera which I had contributed to. So there's a lot of...
Of course. Nice.
So then, using that camera, we used to go to these shops, click product pictures, come back at night, do some basic Photoshop editing, and then upload it in our app. And that is how this journey started.
Nice. Wow. And, all by hand by both of you. So which is exactly. Like part of the whole experience of starting out, right? You have to do it yourself.
Exactly. I think that's the interesting part, right? You get to experience things firsthand, and that in turn helps you in building a better understanding of the market. Whenever you have abstraction layers in between, it is very difficult to get that unfiltered knowledge, which you then use to evolve. And I think staying closer to our users, closer to the market has shaped a lot most of our decisions that we have taken and the way this business has evolved over time. But yeah, that was the beginning. That is how all of this started.
So I think, Sanjeev, one of the things that might be interesting to people, right, is from your perspective, can you describe the proposition that Meesho is, right? Like, I mean, I've seen it in a couple of different contexts. I get it's a two-sided marketplace, physical goods. I get some of it, right, just broadly. But what is the way that you kind of like talk about it, think about it? What's your overall vision, and how would you describe the proposition right now for a user?
So Meesho operates with the vision of, or rather our mission is to democratize e-commerce for everyone in India. So the reason for that is, so right now, other e-commerce platforms are mainly focused and have always been focused on branded products and for customers in tier 1 cities or metros. Now, over the last 4 or 5 years, what has happened is a massive user base is coming online because of Geo Revolution and obviously people being more comfortable with using apps for the first time. So this massive user base, which is now either coming online or is online, but they are still not comfortable in buying online. And their needs are very different from needs of people in tier 1 cities, right? They're more from low and mid-income segment. They don't buy branded products. They are more value conscious. And that is what Meesho is trying to go after, which is enabling anyone in India to go online and buy online for themselves. And now we have roughly 5% of the Indian households shopping with us. And we have close to 4 lakh suppliers on our platform who are now doing business with Meesho. So that is on the user side, which is one side of the marketplace, right? On the supplier side, so we have, again, we target unbranded segments. So there's a huge supplier base of comprising of MSMEs. A lot of them have started selling online for the first time with Meesho. And there are reasons for that. I think in other e-commerce platforms, they have a lot of restrictions in terms of the products that can be listed, the type of cataloging that needs to be there, the kind of experience that needs to be provided. And they are more restrictive in nature, right? So high commissions, additional investments in processes like cataloging. They make selling online an impractical option for a lot of these sellers who are smaller in size, more in the unorganized segment, right? And that is where we are trying to kind of take this seller-first approach of enabling anyone to come and sell online. As long as they have a mobile phone, they can use our app, our seller panel to kind of upload products and start selling online. It's that easy, right? Our tech-first mindset here has helped us in making the product very simple and easy to use. And it is important for the users because they're not comfortable in selling online. At least most of them are doing this for the first time, right? Now with this, they can just take a picture from their mobile phone and upload it on Meesho, and it just goes online on this massive user base that we have. We were the first company in India to introduce 0% commission and provide all our sellers with complete tech, logistics, payment, customer support, etc., to grow their business. And this in turn leads to sellers being able to pass on some of these savings back to customers, leading to further lower prices. And this is important for our segment because they're extremely value conscious. I'll tell you an example there to kind of explain how value conscious they are. Like if you're giving 10 rupee discount on a product and telling them that, okay, this product you'll be receiving it in not 4 days, but 6 days, they're fine with it. This is the kind of difference that you have versus people like you and me who buy on these e-commerce platforms from tier 1 cities, our expectation is that we order today, we get it delivered tomorrow, or maybe 2 days, not more than that, right?
10 minutes.
But even willing to pay more.
Exactly.
Or 10 minutes.
10 minutes business models are now coming up, and they're solving the right problem for the right market. But then there's this massive user base which is left alone. They are not kind of still comfortable in buying online for multiple reasons. Trust is, of course, one of the factors, but also the kind of prices that you have, their affordability is much lower. And so that is where, and that is a white space that we saw, and that is what Meesho is trying to fill.
Awesome. In fact, I have a question on the product piece, which you mentioned briefly, right? That how you took the tech first approach. And if for the kind of, a lot of people here who we are probably talking to here on the show is probably the same tier 1 audience that you're talking about, right? Who are used to e-commerce today. We're used to the high efficiency model of e-commerce, and we value that a lot more. If I can look back on the original sort of P2P marketplace which existed before even these organized e-commerce came, which is like the folks like eBay, right? And back then also, you're right, that as a seller on, let's say, a platform like eBay, it was a little cumbersome. You had to do a lot of mechanics to, work towards, uploading your item and blah, and blah, and blah. Even when that evolved to, let's say, the current other folks like the OLXs of the world and, Quickers of the world, those folks also, they moved a lot of that onto the mobile, yes. And they made it much more easier. They implemented, I think this chat and a bunch of things. When you looked at all of this, what was that little bit of incremental product ease which you could crack? If you could give us a real world example, in the seller side of the product, which probably a lot of consumers will never see unless they become sellers themselves.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of things. I think in the beginning, and of course this has evolved over time, but in the beginning, I think just enabling them to kind of understand how do you describe a product in the minimal way possible. How do you click product pictures, not mandating white background, not mandating a photograph on a model, like a model photograph for your platform. I think that is how we started, right? Of course, we figured out after talking to our sellers what are their problems, and when they said, okay, I'm not comfortable in using Excel because I'm not able to use it. So the initial website that we had was mobile friendly. You can easily list one product, put in 5, 6 fields, and then just make it live very quickly. Understand, have you got an order? Maybe emails don't work for them. So how do you inform them? How do you teach them how to check their panels? So there's a lot of handholding involved in the beginning, but over time we have built product and features around it to make it smoother. And I'll tell you a few examples. Now, on day one, when a seller is trying to list his products on Meesho, out of this pool of, let's say, 20, 30 products, which of these products should he prioritize? We have a product recommendation algorithm for that. We use data science to predict what kind of products sell well on Meesho, and then help them make those decisions on, okay, these are the products that they should prioritize. In unorganized segment, inventory is a big problem. How do you keep a tab on whether this product is still in stock or out of stock, right? And then an extension to this is predicting out of stock is an interesting and a very difficult problem in our kind of marketplace because it's unbranded. So you have this long tail of products getting a lot of orders versus a platform where you have maybe brand selling online where the order distribution is very skewed, right? You just have a lot of data to kind of put into your model and be able to accurately predict when is this inventory going to deplete. How does this affect sellers? If you don't tell them in advance, when is your inventory going out of stock, they won't be able to bring it in stock. Their fulfillments or their manufacturing cycle is long, maybe a month, right? Yeah. So you have to proactively tell them. So inventory prediction was one area where we invested heavily. And if you don't do it, it leads to bad user experience as well, right? So we use data science, we deploy data science there. Again, it's a difficult problem because we don't have a lot of data. It's very distributed. I think we reduced our out of stock by about 20 or 30%. This was iteration over multiple. So we're able to predict even in this kind of setup, which is again very difficult. That is second. Third is which is very basic problem and doesn't surface in case of brands. For brands, prices are defined. Like you have standard pricing. For a kurti, which is not a Nike kurti, it is not a it's not a Zara kurti,
one of one.
It's not a blue kurti. Yeah, exactly. It's one of one, or maybe there are copies existing, but each of them will have different fabric, different manufacturer, and bunch of other things. So how do you decide price for that? Or how do suppliers decide price for that? And there we build price recommendation engine, again using data science, where we try to kind of look at other such products in terms of visual similarity, material, and a bunch of other parameters to help them price it right. Because if a supplier doesn't price it right, it is not going to sell. And if it doesn't sell, probably he's not going to try it further, right? He'll keep trying for maybe a couple of weeks and then he'll give up. But I think this journey of helping suppliers come online and sell online, become successful online, is, I think, going to be a difficult, and we are still solving it. I wouldn't say we have solved it entirely, but we have done a lot of things to make their lives easier.
So if I could ask a few questions about the inventory process, right? I mean, like what you just spoke, I just want to kind of dig into some of this stuff. So typically, how many items does a seller have for sale on a platform like Meesho, right? I mean, are they having 20 pieces, 50 pieces, 100 pieces, 5 pieces? I mean, because I think that would dictate some of how in a small business perspective, I think that dictates like some of how they interact with the platform, right?
Yeah, you're right. I think, so what you mean is for each SKU, how many copies do they have, right? It's not the number of SKUs that you're
right. About. Yeah. Like, so I mean, like how much do they keep on stock?
Yeah.
Or even number of SKUs, right? I mean, like if that, I mean, like, if you have...
So both have different types of problems. So for one SKU, the number of copies that they have defines how difficult inventory or how important inventory prediction is going to be. So let's say for one specific blue, some checkered pattern kurti has, let's say 50 pieces. A supplier can, or maybe let's say 100 pieces. Supplier can safely assume that, like, let's say maybe for the next 1 day or 2 days, I don't have to worry about inventory because probably it will exhaust in, let's say 3-4 days. But if it is only 20 pieces, that problem becomes almost immediate. Similarly, when you try to, the type of suppliers that we have, I'd say it depends. So if you have suppliers who are manufacturing themselves or who are higher up in the value chain, they'll have multiple copies, the order of maybe 30, 40, 50, and so on. But if you have smaller suppliers who are traders, somewhere down in the value chain, right after a manufacturer comes traders who source from multiple manufacturers, they'll have maybe 20, 30, but not more than that. But how do you enable both of them to sell online? Because as a marketplace, we want to enable anyone to come and sell online and become successful online. So it doesn't have to be a bias between. So we proactively avoid bias between a manufacturer and a trader and anyone else. So yeah, that is how the distribution is. And the number of SKUs that they have, that basically doesn't relate with the inventory problem, but that basically defines how many orders a supplier is going to get from Meesho. More the number of SKUs, more the probability of.
But even if it is, so when we're talking about individual inventory on a single SKU, right? The larger the number of items they have, the more useful the predictability algorithm becomes to them, doesn't it? Because if they have only 2 items for a single SKU, it's gone. And I mean, like, yeah, you're going to be out. That's not particularly going to do a lot for them. But I think with the larger numbers, right? So is that like a focus when you're trying to look at merchants, that you would rather have merchants with fewer SKUs with larger numbers for their own good, to maximize their success? But is that how that would play out, or am I?
So we do have certain min cap on the number of inventory, which is you can only list if you have a number of inventories beyond certain limit, but that is not beyond the order of 10 or 20.
Right.
So it's not like 100 or 1,000. But having said that, the argument of inventory prediction algorithm being more important or more relevant for people with more inventories, it's a spectrum. So hypothetically, if someone has 1,000 inventories, this inventory prediction algorithm is not very relevant for this supplier at this point because it will take about a week. But someone who has, let's say, 20, this problem is now. Like in the next 2 days, if you don't give him that feedback, he'll not be able to kind of go and figure out other ways of sourcing the same inventory and bring it back in stock.
And it's also, I don't know if this is always the case, but it's also if you're dealing with people who also have like an offline store, right? Which they might, given the kind of people who are entrepreneurs on your platform.
Yeah.
They also have to manage that stock, right? I'm sure you've given them some tools to sort of map their offline sales and feed that back into the system so that even that is kept on track.
So right now we don't help them in that inventory management beyond Meesho. But the way we shape that behavior is, and probably it gets tuned over time. So once a supplier sees she's getting a lot of orders on Meesho, they keep those inventories reserved for Meesho dedicatedly.
Right.
Now, this is a very difficult behavior to kind of inculcate in MSMEs.
Right. Yeah.
I think historically people have failed in doing that because unless you give them enough value, they're not going to reserve inventory for you. And in Meesho's case also, they'll do it only for a certain period. And that is where we kind of make sure. So our personalization algorithm, for example, takes into account. So our feed is personalized, like every feed that we have, homepage, CLPs, etc. Everything is personalized. That takes into account the lifetime of a product. When was the inventory updated? How much inventory is remaining? And a bunch of other things to make sure if you're going to give the supplier orders, you better do it over the next few days. If you don't, even if you bring in some orders, it is not going to help because probably he has sold it already. So that is where tech first approach comes into play because you cannot enforce this behavior always, but you can tune that behavior if you give them orders within certain time period. So that feedback loop has to be fast.
Wow. Awesome. There's a lot of, actually follow-ups I want to do to go further deep into that. But before we do that, I think it's time for a quick short break and we'll come back and talk some more.
$100. That's all it takes to begin your journey with Bitcoin and Ethereum. No, really. With CoinSwitch, you can start investing in over 100 cryptocurrencies with just 100 rupees. On top of that, there are zero charges for deposits and withdrawals, so you can trade, buy, sell, however and whenever you want. All of this, plus their extremely intuitive interface, makes CoinSwitch the perfect app for beginners in the crypto space. But don't take my word for it. Just download CoinSwitch for free and try it out for yourself. If you'd like more information on cryptocurrencies, tune into a show about crypto with me, Rohan Joshi, my new adventure on IVM Podcasts. CoinSwitch, kuch to badlega.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Sanjeev, you've been sharing a lot about the kind of depth the product has, especially on the seller side, which has helped you scale, right? Which has helped you sort of solve for the typical problems that these people faced, or the hindrances which stop them from getting onto any other e-commerce platform, which even if it allowed them to be on it. But one of the things which I know you guys have solved, or rather called out as a big milestone, is also the amount of entrepreneurs, as you call them, right? These sellers are on your platform are not like sellers, vendors, marketplace folks. They're actually, you call them entrepreneurs. In fact, you also have this, the largest number of women entrepreneurs on your platform. So these are great milestones. Was this like a conscious direction you took? How did you, make this? Why do you call them entrepreneurs, and how do you make sure that that makes them choosing Meesho as the unique destination where they want to be successful?
Yeah, I think with entrepreneurs, it's been a journey. So when we started, we wanted to enable e-commerce for everyone, right? But we saw a lot of people are coming online over the last 3 years, but not comfortable in buying online. And these entrepreneurs, so essentially, I'll tell you who these entrepreneurs are, right? Most of them are women based out of a below tier 1 city, maybe small town, maybe village as well. But they're very ambitious. They want to start their own business. And the offline equivalent of this will be your offline fashion boutiques that you have in different neighborhoods. They have a particular reach, maybe 100, 200, or maybe lesser number of customers. What Meesho did is enable anyone to start their business, which is enable anyone to become an entrepreneur with zero investment. Compare that to the offline equivalent where you needed capital, you needed real estate to kind of set up that shop. Or in some cases, I think women did it. They ran boutiques even from their home itself, but they needed capital to kind of stock the inventory. Stocking inventory comes with multiple issues, which is you have to liquidate it, you have to predict, etc. All of that are multiple problems. But yeah, Meesho enabled them to kind of start this business with zero investment, which is We'll give you everything. The only thing that you need is this art of selling, which is find your customers. And that is what you do better. Try to explain the value prop to them. Find whichever products are best suited for your audience and go ahead and do it on social media. And I think when we started, this behavior was just shaping up, which is when we started, I remember there are a lot of Facebook shopping groups in India, which were dedicated to buying and selling, where entrepreneurs and end customers were interacting with each other. And the typical behavior is entrepreneur will acquire new customers on Facebook Marketplace or Facebook groups from their tier 1, tier 2 connections, and then add them to WhatsApp in a group. And then they start engaging them, sending product pictures, etc. Right? So, and entrepreneurs play a very important role in this ecosystem, specifically in building trust. They act as influencer and curator in their network, which is people who are still not comfortable in buying online. They trust this lady because she has a good fashion sense. She has that credibility in her network. And she knows what works best, what kind of products are best suited for her audience. And so entrepreneurs play an important role. And while we are on this topic, I want to highlight that we started with entrepreneurs, but now we have majority of our users are end customers buying online directly on Meesho. And both of these personas coexist within Meesho. And we see both of these personas growing massively. It's not that now that we have consumers, entrepreneurs' base is not growing. Both of them is growing, but it's just that there are a lot of end customers coming to the platform. And at this point in time, majority is already end customers.
Interesting. Can I ask a somewhat related but somewhat tangential question? The deliveries, right? How do they break down, right? I mean, like how much of it, because I remember the first time I ever heard of Meesho, right? It was in this context that in tier 2, basically people are ordering from Meesho to get free delivery, right? That was the first time I ever heard of like Meesho in like, I think it was like a couple of years ago, but this is the first time I'd ever heard it. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. So, but what, like, how would you break that down, right? What group of people is ordering from like very localized kinds of people who are part of their city or town or what have you, and who is ordering from like other parts of the country? Like, how would you say that breaks down?
At this point in time, all our products that we have, all these suppliers that the products that our suppliers sell are available over everywhere within India, which is all the pin codes which are serviceable. And I think we have more than 27,000 pin codes or something serviceable.
Wow.
So we don't have regional supply chains yet. It's any product which sells on Meesho is available everywhere in India. But so like delivery, the comment that you heard could be because maybe in that case, supplier wanted to include the delivery price in the product itself, and hence the delivery price would be maybe free. Or in all of these cases, delivery price is baked into the product price, and hence the delivery charge is free. But I think the kind of people who buy on Meesho again are from low and mid income segment in below tier 1 cities, people who are extremely value conscious. So I am from a very small city in Jharkhand. It's called Hazaribagh. But in my native, which is not Hazaribagh, it's a very small village from where parents came, right? It's still a very small village, right? You have mud houses even now. And there people are buying. There people know about Meesho, right? And the reason, and they're buying like bed sheets, kurti, and a bunch of things. The reason they buy it online is because they say the price that you get on Meesho is much lower than the price that you get offline. And second, the kind of selection that you have, it is never possible to get that kind of selection in a small town, in a small village. It's not possible at all. And that is the value that Meesho brings on table for this segment of users.
The reason the question came to my mind, right, was because you were discussing the way networks are operating to kind of generate additional, or basically to drive demand on Meesho, right, on the consumer side and on the merchant side, right? And so I would have thought the networks were starting out somewhat local and then could kind of get nationalized. But from what I'm understanding, that was not the way it is. It's just basic.
When you're talking about network, was that entrepreneur and end customer network, or was it the delivery network?
That's what you were mentioning, right? You were talking about how it turns into it goes from Facebook to WhatsApp group.
Understood. Sorry, I misunderstood this as delivery network, which is the supply chain side of things. But yeah, for an entrepreneur on day one, her customers will be people in her extended family or in her society, in that town itself. And then once she builds that credibility, probably that expands regionally, as well as that is not limited to region, to that specific region, because she can leverage Facebook and Instagram to kind of grow her supplier base beyond that locality. But she can do all of this only because she can now serve a customer who is anywhere in India through Meesho, because Meesho takes care of this delivery through our logistics partners.
Yeah. In fact, that, another point on how the sort of the experience you enabled is so different from the organized e-commerce bit. And also the fact that you just mentioned that, the current base of users is both entrepreneurs as well as, people who are buying directly. You guys have yourself had to sort of get into direct selling, right? Of products. Is that also something which you consciously sort of took on? I think you are now obviously also doing like grocery, or doing a whole bunch of this, the entire retail experience, right? Given the current size and scale you operate at. How do you do that in a very balanced way to not sort of eat into the entrepreneur's share of market, or how you see it? Like what's the value proposition there?
Yeah. I think whatever we have done keeping our users in mind. I think user first is one of our core values in Meesho. And this transition, or I would rather say this extension of user base from entrepreneurs to including end customers as well, has happened over time, and it was organically happening. So people who were already comfortable in buying online started discovering Meesho, and they started coming to Meesho directly because we are very close to our users. We keep speaking to them to figure out what is the next biggest problem that we should solve. We got this insight early on and doubled down on it. Having said that, we seen both these personas coexisting. And the reason for that is, so bring some numbers, right? So WhatsApp user base is roughly maybe 600 odd million, right? People. The other e-commerce platforms currently kind of serve your top 100, 120 million odd customers in India, right? In mostly high tier 1 cities. This massive gap that you have in this, there's a spectrum. People who are already comfortable in buying online, and there are others who are not. In this side of the spectrum, entrepreneurs play a very important role in convincing them, in building that trust. And that is where they make money, which is entrepreneurs make money. Once and gradually this behavior changes, which is some of these customers they become comfortable. They are now comfortable. They trust online platforms. They discover Meesho, and then they start buying online directly. But having said that, because this user base is huge, there's enough pie left for entrepreneurs to make money. And this user base is growing itself. People who are coming online for the first time keeps growing every year. Right?
Obviously.
So the market that entrepreneurs have is massive and is growing. And that is how we see these two personas coexisting on Meesho for a very long period.
Okay. And the same sort of baseline tech and baseline infrastructure you've built, like the delivery and the all these algorithms and everything, all of those sort of play into the same product. Is it? How talk to the user side of the product a little bit, and how that has maybe evolved from being just like a catalog listing of stores to what it is today.
I think the good thing about I'd come to algorithms, but the good thing about our user base is that persona is not very different. A lot of entrepreneurs who become entrepreneurs, they become entrepreneurs with Meesho. Most of them are not entrepreneurs already. Like they get to know about Meesho, join Meesho as end customers, and then they know, okay, now I can maybe make money through Meesho as well. Correct. Start my own business through Meesho. And so the personas are not very different. And that is why the kind of problems that you solve for these two audiences overlap a lot. For instance, the personalization algorithm that you have for new user, it remains exactly same, because at this stage, the user base that you have is exactly same, because some of these new users become entrepreneurs, right? Even at a later stage, we change the product slightly to kind of enable them to, for example, we have a share CTA in the product page, in the product listing page and the single product page, where they can share these products, but that is specifically for entrepreneurs. Most of the time, it is not going to be used by end customers. During the checkout flow, you have add margin as an option. But apart from these minor tweaks, most of the algorithms, even the personalization algorithm that we run, it is able to kind of handle both of these personas together. And similarly, on the delivery side, the kind of problems that you face, essentially each order is getting delivered to an end customer, even if an entrepreneur is ordering it, right? So the kind of problems that you have, supply chain optimization, RTOs, prediction on return, etc., all of that remains same for these two personas. So we did not have to kind of change a lot of things in the product.
Interesting.
While trying to kind of handle both of these personas together.
That's a big insight on the kind of people we have in the market, especially this beyond the traditional e-commerce market, which you just shared, that, beyond the 120 to the 600. It's as if we are encapsulating what you're saying is that most Indians out there see they not just buyers as consumers, but they also potentially sellers themselves, like a large amount of overlap. Just
correct.
The opportunity
because we are very ambitious, right? I think everyone in India wants to kind of figure out ways to make money, and more so in low and mid-income segment, right? So because they are super ambitious, it's a self-selection. People who are ambitious and who are able to kind of put all the effort required to do it, they become entrepreneurs. Others keep consuming the experience as end customers.
Nice. You guys have obviously scaled massively in all these years. Like I said at the start of the show, you have all the tags of various successful companies in the country, startups in the country. What is it that you mainly are, you would say, scaling today? Because obviously the product has evolved. You guys have launched a whole bunch of things. I think the latest thing you've launched is even some live streaming. So what is it that you see the product scaling to today, and where is it that you're investing the most? Like, what is that differential experience which you will bring about in your tech and your the tech experience that will take you to the next level from where you are?
Yeah. So I'll talk about tech first, and then I'll come to the business goals that we have. But on the tech, we are currently already seeing 200,000 requests per second scale at our peak. Wow. Which is massive, right? In just 5 years, we have reached this stage. It's a good engineering problem to have, and a great one to kind of motivate the team to kind of do it. And because the time that we got to reach this stage was pretty short, I think we started with building a lot of hacks over time, cleared a lot of tech debt, built a full-fledged scalable microservices architecture to kind of now handle this kind of scale in a good way. But that is on the scale side. Obviously, the growth goals that we have over the next 1 year, we are targeting at least 4 to 5x growth. Imagine the kind of impact that this has on the scaling bit, right? A lot of interesting challenge and difficult scaling problems that we're going to encounter. Meesho is a strongly data-driven company, right? We collect a lot of user behavioral data, obviously, in an anonymized format to kind of understand different insights, different newer problems that we can solve. Our data platform, which is number of events that we ingest, grew 50x over the last 1 year alone. Right? We right now ingest about 3 billion events per day in our data warehouse through our ETL platform. So it's a massive scale right now. So going from here, the kind of business goal that we are taking, one thing that we have already made public is we want to reach 100 million monthly transacting users in next 1 year, which is in itself a huge target to achieve. Yeah. And apart from this, we are investing a lot more in making the experience better for our users. So investing a lot more in logistics optimization, experience optimization. How do you improve your personalization algorithms further and take it to next level where you're able to do maybe real-time personalization as well. Take into account some of the newer signals that you have as soon as user comes into your platform, right? Invest in a lot of recommendation algorithms. On the supplier side also, how do you assist suppliers in taking the right decisions beyond product and price recommendation? We're exploring those things as well. I think RTO address is an interesting problem in India, which is the address that you have is not very well defined.
It's not organized. There's always landmark.
Yeah, maybe this behind this pawn shop and beside this temple. But how do you recognize some of these address formats and maybe figure out if this is the right address, and which kind of leads to RTO, which is user ordering, but not shipment not being able to reach there because the address isn't correct. So a lot of interesting data science problems, a lot of interesting engineering problems because of the scale, and a lot of interesting business problems because with a lot of customers coming on the platform, how do you optimize it further to kind of give them the best experience, right? I think there are a lot of things happening everywhere.
Very cool. I mean, sorry, before you go, Amit, like, we also like to ask, especially, right, because for everyone listening, what is it, where to take all of these challenges, what is it, the one thing that you guys are sort of, asking people who, let's say, want to join you or want to sort of, contribute to the Meesho story? What is it that, they should aspire for? Or even for people who are building in this space for that matter, right? Since you guys are now leading, you've shown something this deep is successful in the e-commerce market in India compared to the organized people who are still figuring this out in various ways or sort of copying you guys now from what it looks like. What do you say what is the next challenge you want to throw out there that people who are interested in solving should solve for or join you in solving for?
Yeah, I think scale itself is the most interesting problem. Probably, if not in 1 year, in the next 1.5 years, we'll reach a scale which nobody has seen in India. Now, how do you build that tech which delivers the best experience to your users? And it's more difficult because your users are in using a low-end smartphone where internet is not very stable. So scale is one problem. The type of device that a user is using to access your platform is another very interesting problem for our mobile engineers and web engineers. For data scientists, essentially in Meesho, the biggest problem for data science is the demand supply matching, which is you have this massive user base, you have this massive pool of catalogs, data is very sparse. How do you do the best demand supply matching in the most optimized way? Kind of deliver best experience, not just to users, but also suppliers, because you have to sustain. It's a flywheel, right? You want to give the best experience to both sides of the marketplace. So for data scientists, this is going to be the most interesting problem.
Nice.
For anyone who is trying to build for this TG specifically, I think one thing that we have learned over time is that this TG behaves differently. I think some of our notions about how our app should be, how the UX should be, how do you design your app, what kind of problems do you solve? Just don't bring your own biases here. Talk to your users. Yeah. For longest time, we did not have, I think even now, we don't have hamburger option, hamburger icon in the app, because for this stage, you have to put everything up front. Like, or even if we have it like some 3 dots somewhere, it's not the important ones. Like everything has to be upfront. Can't expect your users to kind of go deep and figure out what is happening. So
menus,
UX, correct.
It's not doesn't come naturally to them. Yeah,
exactly. I think if you want to take inspiration from WhatsApp. It's the simplest app out there which has been able to kind of get so many users online for the first time. I think my mom is able to use it. Like she's maybe 65 years old. And in Meesho, I have taught her. So we have a share CTA for our entrepreneurs, right? And my mom cannot. The checkout funnel is too complex for her. So I've taught her how to scroll different feed. And of course, every icon is associated with a image. So she knows where there's a kurti, where there's sari. She goes inside, figures out this product, shares it with me, and then I place an order for her.
Wow, nice.
So I think the UX has to be simple enough that anyone can come and just get used to it.
Very cool. Very cool. I mean, on that note, I know there's a lot of things which I'm sure your people can be inspired from you. But as closing notes, Sanjeev, like where would you want to give a call out on where people can reach you? What's the best way to get in touch? If there a company like Meesho, I'm sure has like a ton of open roles all the time, which we'll happily share the links for. But anything you want to just put on the personal note before we close?
Yeah, I think you can reach out to me on sanjeev@meesho.com. It's the email ID, but All the positions are there on our career website. You can go and check it out. We are hiring aggressively. I think we're planning to more than double the team in the next 1 year. So I think that itself is a humongous task, but we want to do that. And
No, I was just going to say, it's such a familiar thing to see. I see we're hiring, take a deep breath aggressively because it's so much of a problem for everybody.
Even then, per engineer, output is massive. Like we're able to operate on a similar level as some of the other e-commerce platforms.
Yeah.
With just 300 engineers as opposed to 200,000 engineers on, let's say, FK. Right.
Yeah.
So that is the kind of efficiency at which we operate. And we do it by kind of giving a lot more ownership to our engineers, right? It's just that it's a super efficient team, high performing team, which is able to deliver not just solve complex business problems, but also at the same time build tech which helps us scale quickly in such a short period.
Cool. Awesome. I would just like to remind everybody before we go, a review or a rating wherever you are listening to this podcast. I hear Spotify has just started ratings right now. So wherever you're listening to this, please do give us a review or a rating. It does help with people finding out about this show. And also do check us out on YouTube. If you're not, we put this stuff up on video as well as on YouTube too.
Perfect. Sanjeev, I mean, this was a lot. I'm sure I have enough questions for another episode if we had the time, but we will not take you away from, your, I'm guessing you have hiring interviews, if nothing else, for sure, from the sound of it.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you so much for doing this. This was great. We are going to obviously share the information when we publish this. So for everyone else listening, please check out the page. And Sanjeev, all the best to this massive ambition that you guys have. And we hope to really see this, playing out. And it'll be it'll be a whole new tag, I'm sure, which does not exist in the market yet for other startups that you guys will achieve in this annual plan.
Thank you.
Congratulations and all the best.
Okay. Thank you.
Shunya One is brought to you by Intel. Performance made flexible. That's how wonderful gets done. Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Advertising is Dead, Varun talks to Anmol Gill, Head of Consumer Marketing at Bacardi India. They discuss the alco-bev industry, role of culture in marketing, and a whole lot more. On the Storytellers and Storysellers podcast, Vineet talks to Ambi and Bindu Subramaniam about the Sapa School of Music. They aim to make music learning more fun and accessible. Why is Google refusing to pull down a pro-suicide website? The Press Decode hosts analyze this piece of news. On Ikka Dukka Economy, Abhinav and Dr. Bharat Junjunwala cover everything there is to learn about IPOs. And on Say No to Drama, Chetna talks about how what-ifs could be a major barrier to most of your problems. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Go check out our YouTube channels. We go live on a whole bunch of different things. We have a number of different channels. You can find them on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week: Cred, Bank of Baroda, CoinSwitch Kuber, Intel, and Oxfam India. Thank you for making this possible.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.